Yeah. Have you ever argued with someone about them? How did that go? Like that? So I'm going to show you how to reach inside someone's mind and change their beliefs. It doesn't work every time, but it works well enough for literature, political propaganda, and advertising. Most of the things that we believe got there because of the stories we've been told. I'm Linda Rosewood. I am not a writing teacher. I am a writer who has written one book, so I have a lot to learn. But today I want to share how to write stories that change beliefs. Stories that frame a feminist message deep inside the story, connecting emotionally to what the characters and the readers desire. Here's what I'm going to talk about. The way that you write a feminist story is you identify a patriarchal lie, you identify a parallel feminist truth, and a character in that story chooses that truth to reach the story goal. So that's the whole talk. And if it doesn't make sense right now, it will by the end of my talk. So what is a feminist story? My definition is a story about a woman freeing themselves from men's domination. You can have your own definition. We can talk about today what will work with your definition too, because what I'm talking about today actually works for all stories. It really doesn't matter how you define feminism or what kind of story you're telling. I just want to talk about feminist stories today. So sometime during COVID, I took a vow to never again argue with someone on the internet. But despite my vow, I want to have a public voice. I do want to change people's beliefs about power and women's lives. But we all know that you can't reason someone into something that they weren't reasoned into. This is not just something that we learned the hard way. It's really how our brains evolved. There are experiments that people have done about how beliefs are formed in our brains. They use functional MRI, and our brains really can't tell the difference between reason and belief. Human beings evaluate the truth of a belief like, because women bear children, they must act womanly. We can't tell the difference between that and a belief that says the sun is a mass of incandescent gas. It's hard to believe at first, but our brains never evolved a separate system for detecting the veracity of the fact. It's belief all the way down. And we are absolutely screwed if we think that rationally arguing with people will change their minds. So, fortunately, stories got us into this, and stories can get us out. How beliefs form. In reality, we don't form beliefs through rational thought, but through emotions, experiences, social influences. And these emotions, experiences, and social influences can happen in real life, or they can happen through stories. Our brains really can't change the difference. So my thesis is stories change belief. And if that's not enough to get you on board with my idea, there's a real subversive need for feminist stories. Oppressed people have always told stories for political ends. We tell these subversive stories to pass on methods. We pass on these stories to embed our values in our cultures. The values in our stories become wisdom in our culture, and the wisdom of a story is called the theme. So now I'm going to talk about theme. Suppose I want to write a story with the feminist theme of gender roles are not innate, but they create a society that harms women. That's my theme. Sounds kind of trite, like common sense. When stripped of their story context, themes usually do sound like common sense. And that is why bolting your theme into a story with someone talking, and having dialogue and people talking with each other, or a big speech at the end of the story, it won't change anybody. To embed a feminist theme into a story, you need to know a little bit about story structure, and especially what's happening when a story ends. So all stories have the same elements, all these things. And when you write a story, you can start with plot or a character or just a setting and just start writing. But for this workshop, we're going to start with a character who needs to change something about herself. Some literature majors or story analysts, they would call this thing that she needs to change about herself the wound. Sometimes it's called the misbelief. But for this feminist story, I'm going to call it the lies we believe. And this approach comes from a very good writing teacher named K.M. Weiland. Highly recommend her website and her books. They're great. So if you begin with a character who believes a patriarchal lie, and we'll talk about those in a minute, she believes this lie for good reasons. Everything in her life, up to the moment that the story starts, the lie works for her. And then the story begins, and events in her life begin to challenge the lie, and she suffers because she keeps believing in it. And then in the end, in order to reach whatever her goal is, she has to reject the lie to get what she wants. So let's imagine a woman who believes a lie. Because women bear children, they must work, dress, and speak in a womanly manner. In the story, the woman has to reach a goal. She has to save her family. She has to build a successful business. She has to defeat a monster. Oh yeah. And she struggles through the story, and because she believes the lie, she acts accordingly and fails to reach her goal. Wait, let me get through here. There we go. And all along in the story, the truth is right there in front of her, but she can't see it yet. And only near the end does she come to realize the truth, that gender roles are not innate and we can create a world without them. And that is where it happens. That is where, if the reader has come along for the story, at this moment, when the character rejects the lie and embraces the truth, then the reader does too. Because that's how our brains form beliefs. Now, what happened in the story? What happened? Did she kill the monster and that showed her the truth? I don't know. I haven't written that story. That's the art of writing. But that's where the art comes in. So let me just belabor this point. Theme arises organically from the story. A theme that changes readers' beliefs arises organically as the character gives up the lie for the truth. Whatever it is that the character chooses at the end of the story, that is the theme, whether you intended it or not. And it works in every kind of story. Here's 5 plots in Western literature. The hero's turn. She believes the lie, comes to accept the truth. The superhero knows the truth, and everyone around her believes the lie, and they have to change. In A Story of a Fall, she believes a lie, and then she almost accepts it, and then she rejects it. There's a character in Harry Potter who does that, Bellatrix Lestrange. Totally evil. At the end, she starts to accept the truth. Oh my God, my family. And then she chooses evil in the end. story will fall. The corruption story, this happens a lot in feminist circles. A person is attacking evil so much, she becomes corrupted by the thing that she's been fighting. That happened to Willow Rosenberg in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And then in the book that I wrote, I wanted to write a disillusionment arc for one of the characters. She is offered the benefits of a feminist utopia that they're trying to build. Can't give it up in the end. Oh, sorry, spoiler, but it's still good. So, what is theme exactly? Here's a few things that it is not. It's not vague. A lot of times you'll see people saying that this is the theme of a book. That's fine. It works for literature majors or search engines, but it is no help to a writer to say my book is about family. It's not a character. Obviously, characters experience themes, but just having a female character, that's not a theme. And it's not the plot either. A story with female characters isn't feminist, in my opinion, unless she makes that feminist choice. There's a lot of stories about women who that valorize her sacrifices for others. I wouldn't consider that a feminist story. Sometimes they choose it's a story where a woman chooses her family instead of herself. Sorry, I don't consider that feminist either, even though we have families. And, I find a lot of feminist stories, will be about women who act alone and the women around her have abandoned her. And I think that's a common trope, not a feminist story. So now we're ready to write the core of some feminist stories. Oh my God, sorry. I don't know how that got in there. I don't know. Okay, story structure. Getting into the weeds now. In a story, the character must story goal, or else something bad will happen. How do we know that? How do we know that this is a story? Because writers have analyzed stories and reverse engineered them. It's not like people came up with what a story is and then told writers how to do this. This is how we do it. Humans do it probably for at least 100,000 years. Or how long is language? 40,000 years? It's deep inside our brains. So she has to strive for something. So an alien, Ripley, must kill the aliens or everyone will die. In his Dark Materials, Lyra must defeat the Magisterium or children will die. It's always a specific thing. It's not world peace, or it's not self-acceptance. Those are not goals. So this is enough to begin writing a story, but if you have a theme in mind, this is how you do it with a feminist theme. The character must do the thing by choosing a feminist theme or else. And notice what happens here. If theme arises organically, like I've said, so does truth. The truth that changes a reader's beliefs will arise organically as the character gives up the lie for the truth. So here's that early slide again. And now you understand what it means. You identify a patriarchal lie, you identify a feminist truth, and you think about a situation. You don't know the whole thing yet, but a character chooses that truth to reach her story goal. Now, you can learn all of this, but you actually have to write. Just like you can read about parenthood, but you actually have to parent to be a parent. So when you're in the middle of a draft and you're like, why am I doing this? And I've wasted my time and this is shit. Like you can always go back to this one moment of choice where the lies must be abandoned and the truth about women's lives and power has to be embraced or else all is lost. And that becomes your guiding star. And then as the story proceeds, she can't embrace the truth at the beginning because there won't be a story. She needs to refuse to even try to question the lie. And she might say, oh, the lie she believes, it's crucial. I have to believe that lie, otherwise I won't get to the goal. And she needs to try alternatives to the truth and never reach her goal because of the lie. And at one point, she may decide she doesn't want the story goal at all because it's too hard to give up the lie. But finally, she embraces the truth, and the story ends after much adventure. And when she stops believing the patriarchal lie, so does the reader. So I don't know if we want to, I think we might take some time later. I'll just finish up my talk. I have a little bit more, and we can sort of think about some lies and truths if we want to actually work out some story ideas together. But remember that when you're thinking about the character, she's the one who believes the lie, or the people around her do. The story goal, if you can think about a goal that the audience that you're intending relates to, then they will also relate to that goal and read themselves into the story. The stakes often is about death, but in a romance, it can be heartbreak. So it doesn't have to be, it could be the end of a friendship, or it has to be it's usually some kind of metaphorical end or real end of something. And here's how you could just write down a quick, some questions to ask when you are thinking about how to write a feminist story. If you're thinking about someone who believes the lie, who would gain from living the truth? And who would get something when she gives it up? The original lie that she has, it usually is something kind of sensible that she believes. It can't just be outrageous. It's just something normal. Okay, I think we'll go through this slide later. Now, when you create the story, the specific truth that you thought the story was about, it might just disappear, because that's what writing is. But in the end, if she chooses the feminist truth and reaches her goal because of that choice, you've written a feminist story. The end. I have some links and sources, so if you want the deck, you can see where I got my ideas about theme, my ideas about writing, my ideas about how the brain works is here, and I have copies of my book if you would like to read it. Thank you very much.